August 2025, former US President Donald Trump returned to the stage with one of his trademark speeches, part humor, part mockery, and part political warning. Before a cheering crowd, Trump mixed offhand jokes with serious accusations, framing himself as America's ultimate defender against crime. He began with a joke, comparing a tall athlete to an unfair player in women's basketball. "We all have our place," he said, "and I've got mine too." But the punchline quickly shifted to something darker. Trump told his supporters that the political establishment had set a trap for him, that while he stood firmly against crime, Democrats were, in his words, for crime. From there, Trump pivoted to his familiar targets. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer became the first in the line of fire. Trump mocked his appearance, saying Schumer looked as if he had aged 100 years. And while he insisted that looks don't matter in politics, he used the insult as a springboard to cast Schumer as a failing leader in a failing system. But it was Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker who drew some of Trump's sharpest ridicule. He described him as a slob who, according to Trump, had even been thrown out of his family's business. The attack was personal, but it carried a political message. Chicago, Trump claimed, was the worst, plagued by crime and violence, and yet its governor rejected his help. Trump expanded the critique to Washington, D.C., where he said crime was the worst it ever was. He insisted that only his intervention had turned the tide, boasting that more than 1,000 criminals had been arrested in just 13 days. "It's out of control," he repeated, in Illinois, in New York, in California. For Trump, the numbers were proof that his methods worked and his critics were failing. He recounted a moment with Maryland's Democratic Governor Wes Moore, recalling how Moore once privately praised his leadership. "Sir, you're doing an unbelievable job," Trump quoted him as saying. Yet, in public, Trump complained, Moore called him a dictator. This contradiction, Trump argued, revealed the emptiness of his opponent's attacks. And in a striking reversal, Trump turned the label of dictator into a badge of effectiveness. A lot of people say, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. But I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime. The theme of crime and order threaded throughout his speech, but it wasn't his only point. Trump took credit for global sporting events, claiming that the United States would not have hosted the Olympics or the World Cup without his intervention. He described the World Cup as the equivalent of 45 Super Bowls and recalled conversations with event organisers who, he said, told him he was the only reason the tournaments would take place on American soil. This was more than simple bragging. For Trump, the Olympics and the World Cup became symbols of national prestige, proof that under his leadership, the US could not only keep its streets safe, but also command the world stage. He lamented that he once thought he wouldn't be president to see the games, before adding with a smirk that little things happen. Thank you, God. The audience cheered as Trump imagined the future, the 250th anniversary of the United States, the World Cup, the Olympics. Events, he said, would be safer, more exciting and more successful under his leadership than under somebody else's. It was a vision of America not just celebrated, but secured by his presence. From there, he shifted to another recurring theme, the courts. Trump praised the Supreme Court for recent rulings that he said allowed him to select the best people for the military and other institutions without what he derided as woke restrictions. To Trump, these decisions represented a triumph of merit over ideology and another example of how his presidency had restored strength where others had weakened it. Throughout the speech, the rhythm was familiar: boast, attack, boast again. He mocked his opponents, recounted his victories, and repeatedly cast himself as the man who delivered results while others dithered. For every accusation of dictatorship, he offered the counterclaim of order. For every criticism of his style, he produced numbers, events, and anecdotes to prove his point. By the closing moments, his message crystallized. America, he declared, was in incredible shape. Its military was strong, respected, and ready. The Supreme Court was making historic decisions, and the future, filled with global sporting events and national anniversaries, would be brighter under his leadership than under any rival. What Trump offered was more than a campaign speech. It was a portrait of himself as a paradox, mocked as a dictator, but praised, even grudgingly, for results, dismissed by opponents, but adored by crowds. A man who, in his own telling, had restored safety to America's cities, won prestige on the global stage, and remained the only leader capable of protecting the nation from chaos. For his supporters, it was vintage Trump, a rallying cry against crime, a declaration of American greatness, and a reminder that even in the face of criticism, he sees himself as the indispensable figure in America's story. For his critics, it was the same old playbook: exaggerations, personal attacks, and claims that blurred the line between strong leadership and authoritarian impulse. Either way, Trump ensured once again that he dominated the conversation. And in his own words, he promised the crowd 3.5 very exciting years ahead, filled with strength, safety, and celebration, all under his watch.